This week on Jersey Matters, the final debate between Democratic Governor Phil Murphy and Republican challenger former Assemblyman Jack Ciattarelli. We have a post-debate interview with Republican Jack Ciattarelli. There are some big changes at the polls for this election. Monmouth County Clerk Christine Hanlon tells voters what they need to know. And COVID-19 is still keeping couples from having the wedding of their dreams. Welcome to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Mendte. Well, the final debate for New Jersey governor was on Tuesday, and it was contentious. Jersey Matters' Phil Andrews was there. Phil.
Well, entering this final debate, Governor Murphy held a double-digit lead over his opponent in the polling. Did Jack Ciattarelli do enough to narrow that gap?
Now, this week's debate took place at the Flieger Concert Hall here on the campus of Rowan University in Glassboro. And prior to the event, each candidate's respective supporters were outside voicing support for their guy.
We back Jack! We back Jack! We back Jack! We back Jack!
4 more years! 4 more years! 4 more years! 4 more years!
Unfortunately, supporters carried that same energy into the debate, and at times it caused problems for the panel asking the questions and for the candidates trying to hear them.
Please, audience, allow the candidates to finish their responses.
A debate has broken out at a hockey game. Come on, guys.
Guys, come on.
Listen, the audience was rowdy. I think it made it more challenging. We applaud their enthusiasm, but it certainly made it more challenging. But on stage, I got to tell you, it was loud. It was loud. And there were disruptions because of the enthusiasm and the like.
Now, unlike the first debate, Governor Murphy tried to stay away from the name Trump, but was quick to blame the previous Christie regime for some of the mess his administration inherited.
It was pathetic what we inherited. And this used to be, by the way, the #1 transit system in America. Perennially, it was held up as the gold standard, and it had been ruined by the administration that preceded us.
One of the things that infuriates the people of New Jersey, you asked for the job. You asked for the job. You knew what you were getting yourself into, and yet, you know what we hear repeatedly from you? It's always the previous administration's fault or Donald Trump's fault. Okay? So,
that's because it's the truth. He said something about, well, why'd you want the job in the first place? I wanted to say, I wanted the job in the first place because I wanted to fix New Jersey, and that's exactly what we're doing.
New Jersey, the state we love, is broken. You know it, and I know it. It needs to be fixed, and that's what my candidacy is really all about. If you like paying the highest property taxes in the nation, if you like having the worst business climate in the nation, waiting 5 hours online at motor vehicles, waiting month after painful month for your unemployment benefits, or not being able to get anybody on the phone in a state department within our state government, vote for Phil Murphy.
Do we continue to make the tough calls based on science and data to save as many lives as we can, or do we put lives at risk because we play politics? Do we stand up for women's reproductive freedoms?
Folks,
or do we think,
the
as my opponent thinks, that Donald Trump's greatest legacy is free Supreme Court? I know where I am. Don't sit this one out, folks. Serving as your governor is the honor of my lifetime. I'm asking for 4 more years.
And so both candidates have had their final say. Now it's up to you, the New Jersey voter, to go out and voice your opinion, which you can do on Election Day, November 2nd. At Rowan University for Jersey Matters, I'm Phil Andrews.
All right, thank you, Phil. When we come right back, we'll talk to one of the participants in that debate, Republican Jack Ciattarelli. That's next. Welcome back to Jersey Matters. As we just showed you a moment ago, the two top candidates for governor of New Jersey, incumbent Phil Murphy, the Democrat, and Republican challenger Jack Ciattarelli, debated on Tuesday night. It was the last chance for voters to see the two top candidates go head to head. We reached out to both candidates, but only Republican Jack Ciattarelli responded. So here's our interview with Jack Ciattarelli. Assemblyman Ciattarelli, as always, thank you so much for your time. You had a debate last night. Let me just ask you a general question in the beginning. How do you feel like it went?
I thought it went well, Larry, in terms of me demonstrating that there's a very big difference between the two of us in terms of style, communication skill, vision for the future. And listen, I always try to use rhetoric that brings people together. The governor, in my opinion, just continues to incite class warfare, and he's the one that engages in an us versus them type of approach. That's not my leadership style.
It's interesting that yesterday the New York Times did an article saying that this election is going to be a litmus test, a political test for masks and vaccine mandates. And that did come up in the debate. I want to dig down on that a little bit to get your exact position on it. And I know you said in the debate that you don't want to require vaccines, but you encourage it and that you have been vaccinated. So let me ask you about the current mandates for vaccines for some state employees, for hospital workers, for daycare workers. Would you lift that?
Listen, I think people that work in a healthcare setting should be vaccinated. If they don't want to be vaccinated, if the organization is big enough, I think that they should be accommodated. I think the governor got it right, quite frankly, with his policy for teachers. You get vaccinated or you get tested twice a week. Larry, this isn't easy. There's a lot of very, very strong disagreement, and we're going to tear each other apart if we try any one-size-fits-all approach. I'm all about the science. I'm vaccinated. I promoted it. I'm strongly encouraging others to do the same. Do I think government has a right to tell you you have to take a vaccine? I don't. So then I'm trying to find a policy that works for the vast majority, realizing you can't always make everybody happy.
I get it. But you would, just to make certain that I'm getting you this clear, you would keep the Murphy mandate for healthcare workers and school workers, right?
Larry, in my opinion, that's not really a mandate. You don't have to get the vaccination. If you don't get it, you have to be tested twice a week. I think that's the right approach. Now, okay. I'm not going to tell private business what to do. This is an at-will employment state. That's up to employers and their employees. But where those governmental employees are under my jurisdiction, I think the governor got it right in his teacher policy.
Yeah, you were pushed pretty hard on the vaccines, and I wasn't sure if the governor was pushed as hard on vaccines, because he said two things recently that for those that don't want vaccine mandates, that don't want to be required to get a vaccine, probably raised some eyebrows, and I don't believe it was brought up, and that is that he is not against requiring vaccines for school children like California did. And he also said he is not against requiring a proof of vaccine to get into gyms and restaurants and other crowded events like they're doing in New York right now. First, let me get your reaction to that, and I assume you wouldn't do either.
There will be no student vaccine mandate under Governor Ciattarelli. The CDC has been very clear here about what we're seeing, even with the Delta variant, that children are susceptible to the virus, but they're not susceptible to serious illness or death. And I just think that that's a parent's decision. There will be no student, no child vaccine mandate under Governor Ciattarelli. And quite frankly, Larry, I think the decision, if you own a private business, that is your decision.
There is some suspicion, since he said they are not off the table, which is what he said about both of those mandates for school children and requiring proof of vaccine, that he's waiting for this election to be over and he possibly could do it. I wish he was here so I could ask him, but he keeps refusing to come on. Do you feel that way?
I can't help but feel that way, Larry, about this governor. In fact, a higher up in one of the larger public sector unions told me that he told them, just get me through the election. So listen, I think Newsom could have been more transparent with the people of California with the recent recall vote. But of course, he waited until after the recall vote to say that he was putting in place a vaccine mandate for children.
They keep tying you to Donald Trump, and I brought this up the last time we talked, that it's interesting because the entire time you were in the primaries, you were accused of not being close enough to Donald Trump, and now you're too close to Donald Trump. I don't think you can win either way. And you've handled that really well in the debates. The interesting thing to me is that President Biden's approval rating in many of the polls has fallen under 40%, and yet his name rarely comes up. Why have you chosen not to try to tie the Governor Murphy to Joe Biden?
I was locked and loaded to do that, Larry, last night and say to the governor, you want to talk about presidents? Number one, Trump's no longer our president, but let's talk about our current president. Let's talk about supply chain issues. Let's talk about inflation. Let's talk about the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Let's talk about the fact that he doesn't support bringing back the SALT deduction, the ability for New Jerseyans to deduct state and local taxes, when in fact he's raising their personal taxes and their business taxes. Now the SALT is more important than ever. So you want to talk about presidents? Let's have that discussion.
You know, there's some disconnect, I think, sometimes on what the questioners and the people in the media care about and what people care about. And I will tell you, the number one complaint we get when we were asked to do stories about, and some of the emails are heartbreaking, are people that are looking for unemployment benefits and they can't get through and they can't get answers, and phone calls go unanswered. I interviewed Senate President Sweeney one time and his phone kept ringing, and I said, you want to get that? And he said, you know what that is? That's people looking for somebody to talk to about unemployment benefits. It seems to me that should be coming up more because that's what people care about. How does that problem get fixed?
Well, first of all, you need a hands-on CEO as governor. Listen, I love kissing babies and walking in parades, but that's not what New Jersey needs right now. I will be hands-on, and my entire cabinet will show up to work every day and run our state government. It's bloated, it's inefficient, it's been corrupted by special interests, and the University of Chicago says that no state in the country is worse in terms of being responsive to citizens. We can't have that. I mean, if your budget, Larry, was up $11 billion, maybe you wouldn't mind if the government worked. But we are failing in delivering the most fundamental of services, including unemployment benefits or getting somebody on the line. So as I said, my closing statement is, if you're okay with that, vote for Phil Murphy.
One last question, and it came up at the very end of the debate. When you were both making your closing statements, Governor Murphy at one point turned to you and said, you know, if you stand with moving forward, you stand with me. If you stand for the Confederate flag and white supremacists, he pointed at you and said, that's your guy. It was an accusation of racism. And I know you're respectful of the rules of the debate, but I'm not certain if someone called me a racist, I'd be able to control myself. What were you feeling at that moment? And do you want to comment on that now, since you didn't get a chance to comment last night?
Larry, I'll say this. His rhetoric says more about him than it does about me. And here's what else I hear in his rhetoric and the lies and the like. This is a very desperate man who's desperate to be reelected, and he knows he's in trouble. I'm just going to continue to go out and be Jack Ciattarelli, and I'm confident in the people of New Jersey come November 2nd.
I want to say one more time that we have offered several times, not only after both debates, but in the weeks in between, in the weeks before, and over the last couple of years, for Governor Murphy to come on this show. And he has politely turned us down or ignored us every single time. And I know he's done that with other media outlets in New Jersey. So I just wanted to make certain that I'm asking you these questions. I would certainly give him the same opportunity if he would take it. And we have given him the same opportunity. He's just turned us down.
Larry, you're not alone. He's the first governor in his entire first term that hasn't had a single editorial board meeting with the state newspaper, not one.
You'd think they wouldn't endorse him then.
We'll see.
You think that would be a requirement for an endorsement, at least?
One would think.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Larry.
Former Assemblyman Jack Ciattarelli, Republican candidate for governor. Still to come on Jersey Matters, what you need to know if you plan on voting in this year's election. Important information next. Welcome back to Jersey Matters. Election Day is November 2nd, and once again this year, for voters in New Jersey, things are going to be a little bit different. Here is Monmouth County Clerk Christine Hanlon to explain. Thanks so much for doing this. We wanted to check in with you, and we appreciate your time. We wanted to check in because there's been so much talk about voting laws across the country and the voting rules last year for the pandemic and now the voting for this election. Has anything changed? When and how can people vote?
Well, there's a big change this year, and thanks for having me with you today. Earlier this year, Governor Murphy signed a law mandating what's called early in-person voting. And that is the biggest change this year to our voting process. It's something that has never happened before in New Jersey. So it's a whole new procedure that the county election offices have been working to implement. There are 3 ways to vote this year. Our traditional voting methods that people are normally used to, except for last year, that was just a one-time situation in 2020. But normally we have in-person voting on election day, and we have vote by mail, and which begins 45 days prior to election day. And
so that's happening right now.
That is ongoing, yes, by law. 45 days prior to election day, ballots must be sent out to voters, and then on an ongoing basis. So if you were already on the list, you would have been in that first mailing that the county clerks did for 45 days before the election. And now people can apply for vote by mail ballots at any time leading up to election day. And now, for the first time in New Jersey history, we have this in-person early voting procedure. And that's very exciting for New Jersey. And it's going to be a 9-day period where voters can vote in person on machines at specially designated polling locations.
There was some consternation about that, I remember, when it was first announced, because some counties were saying, we can't possibly get ready for this on time. You're throwing this at us at the last minute. We're worried that we're going to be able to get all of the mechanisms in place in time. Has there been any problems?
Well, I would say it has been very challenging for the election officials to implement this in a short period of time. When you look at what is involved in implementing an early voting in-person procedure, there are many components that go along with this requirement. For instance, in order to effectuate early voting, we have to switch to all new technology throughout the state. And it is mandated that we have what's called electronic poll books. Voters are used to going into a polling location and they see a paper poll book, and the poll worker finds their name and the voter signs the paper poll book, and then they proceed to go to the voting machine. Because of early voting, all of the counties had to purchase these electronic poll books, not just for the early voting period, but also for every polling location on election day, which you can imagine is a big deal because, number one, the poll books had to be certified by the state. They weren't certified at the time the law was passed. And then the counties had to begin choosing the product that they wanted, going through the procurement process, and all of the technology that helps these electronic poll books work. It's not just, here's a book, set it up. These poll books have to talk to each other for early voting all day long, so that voters don't go to one polling location and then go to another. The electronic poll books have to be talking to each other and updating constantly throughout the day. So it's the procurement, it's purchasing all this equipment and making sure the connectivity is there, getting all the components to make sure that they can connect, making sure everything's secure. And that's only one piece of the puzzle. You also had to invest in new voting machines for early voting because there are only a limited number of polling locations that will be open for the early voting process.
So how much lead time did you get to have to do all of this?
A couple of months. We're still getting recommendations and regulations as the days go on with respect to things that we have to do. Every time you accomplish one piece of the puzzle, there's a new query that comes up, and it's, oh, nobody thought of that. We now have to address that issue.
You know what's going on right now? Voters are hearing you say all this and they're going, oh no, there's going to be problems.
Well, I do not expect there to be problems. I mean, our election officials have been working every day to make sure that this process is going to be able to be implemented. We've done things like this before. October 23rd is the date that the in-person early voting starts.
Is there any of this, all of that you're talking about, that's going to confuse voters at all? What are the most important things they need to know?
Well, I would say the most important points are that there are 3 ways to vote this year. Vote by mail, if you so choose, vote on election day in person, or vote early in person at one of the specially designated polling locations.
I just want to help people to get out and vote. And I know that's been your job, and it sounds like Monmouth County is in good hands. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Monmouth County Clerk Christine Hanlon, next on Jersey Matters.
In the news, we've recently been hearing more and more about a breakthrough case of COVID-19. So what does that mean exactly, and where does that leave us in this pandemic? We'll share that with you coming up next on Jersey Matters.
Welcome back to Jersey Matters. So you're fully vaccinated, so you feel fully protected, and then you come down with COVID-19. Jersey Matters' Kimberly Kravitz spoke with some of the unfortunate few who are breakthrough cases. Kimberly.
Experts blame the Delta variant for a rise in breakthrough COVID-19 cases. So what does this mean exactly, and how can we best avoid it?
A breakthrough case of COVID is when somebody who's been fully immunized against COVID with 2 or 1 of the appropriate vaccines gets a case of COVID.
All along, the CDC says that contracting a mild case of COVID-19 is still possible, even after a person receives their vaccine.
Nobody ever really said vaccination was 100% effective at preventing anybody from getting sick. It did have a close to 100% success at preventing death.
The president of the state's largest public hospital, Deborah Visconi, developed a breakthrough case of COVID-19 after both shots of Pfizer.
I was fully vaccinated, which I am certain played a part in the fact that I didn't have significant symptoms and I didn't have to get hospitalized.
Viscomi suffers from asthma and is certain that she could have had a much worse case of COVID-19.
I felt the tightness of the chest and the cough, and you just feel like you're out of control of your respiratory system.
Dominic Frontera, an 80-year-old man that suffers of COPD, contracted COVID-19 after his second shot of Moderna, and he was hospitalized.
I was lucky because the breathing became controllable with oxygen for that rest of the evening, but I did have aches and pains. Once in a while, breathing was difficult. I still don't have taste back.
Frontera shared a story about his roommate in the hospital who had a much worse case of COVID-19.
And he asked me, was I vaccinated? And I said, yes, I was. And he said, you see and you have it? I said, were you vaccinated? And he said, no. And I said, well, maybe that's why your case is a lot worse than mine.
21-year-old Grace Hugel tells me that she too tested positive for COVID-19 a few months after her second Pfizer shot.
Upon reflection, I definitely was one of those people who was like, I'm vaccinated, I'm indestructible, like I don't need to worry anymore. I started, getting cold flu-like symptoms, but something that I've always thought about during that time and upon reflection afterwards is how much was psychosomatic in a sense, where it's now that I know, I've been tested positive.
Headaches, runny nose, sneezing, sore throat, and loss of smell are all symptoms of a breakthrough case of COVID. So, how high are our chances of getting COVID after we've been fully vaccinated?
The only thing you can do if you're vaccinated to avoid getting COVID is to stay away from people with COVID wear a mask, wash your hands, do the things that we've always talked about doing to avoid COVID. But if you're exposed to COVID and it gets into your nose or wherever the portal of entry is into your body and it takes hold there, you might develop COVID.
Above all, the big takeaway from all of these responses:
the vaccines are safe and effective. And if it could happen to somebody like me that is super protected, and I just, I believe it was that one incident where I let my guard down, it can happen to anyone. And your best defense against getting very sick, ending up in a hospital on a ventilator, are really minimized by getting the vaccine. So,
according to the CDC, post-vaccine immunity wanes over time. Both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are said to lose some efficacy over time. They say about 4 months. As far as the J&J one-time shot, they say is the least effective overall. Reporting for Jersey Matters, I'm Kimberly Kravitz.
Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Mendte. COVID-19 and its many mutations has been difficult for the world to shake. So what are we all in for over the holidays? I asked that question to Dr. Judith Lightfoot, Chief of Infectious Diseases at Rowan University. Dr. Lightfoot, thanks so much for making some time for us today. We're all concerned about what happens next with COVID-19. I saw that you were quoted in an article that predicted a COVID winter. Is that what we're looking for? Are we looking for an increase in cases over the winter?
Well, as you know, Larry, the pandemic has changed. It is predicted that we're maybe coming out of this maybe a little sooner than what has been expected. Prior to probably a month ago or 2.5 months ago, when I actually said that statement, we were in our 4th wave of this epidemic. Our hospitals were filling up again and the cases were insurmountable. But now, with everyone are increasing in the number of vaccinations, we may be just seeing, maybe, and it's just still too early to say which way we're going, because I'm actively still seeing active COVID cases. But hopefully, as the vaccine hesitancy lessens and more people become vaccinated, including our child pediatric population, once that vaccine is approved, and sometime in late October, and we start to roll out that vaccination, at least with Pfizer, by Thanksgiving, maybe we will see that those cases to continue to decline. But I think it's going to be week to week. I think it's going to be week to week.
Yeah, no,
so I don't want to say, because I did not want to see where we were this fall. I was not expecting this to be this fall, as I expected that once we showed scientific evidence that the vaccines were efficacious and that there were going to be less side effects. And I thought once people had the scientific evidence, the FDA approval, then more people will get the vaccine. And we've had a mismatch of that. We've had people who did get it, and we still have people that they want more and more. And we have these websites or sites that thankfully are now being taken down, or people are now scrutinizing what's being posted so that inaccuracies can be taken down, so that people can get true information and get the facts about COVID and get the facts about vaccination.
But Doctor, one of the things that I think we've discovered, and you're right, the vaccine hesitancy is a big part of it, but one of the things I think we've discovered, and scientists don't like to hear, is that the only thing predictable about an epidemic and the only thing predictable about COVID-19 is that it's unpredictable. We've been told many, many times things are going to get better and they get worse. And we've been told that things are going to get worse and they get better. And so what can we trust? Are we really getting a handle on this now?
Only time will tell.
Right.
I think realistically, when we first or when it was mentioned that people could come out of their mask, in my opinion, that was way too soon. And that's not a retrospective. That was a call that I said at the time. Even though for those who were vaccinated, I still say we cannot let our guard down. Here at Rowan University School of Osteopathic Medicine, we do not let our guards down, whether we're here at Rowan or whether we're outside of Rowan, whether you're vaccinated or whether you have your booster. I myself, as well as I encourage all of my patients, that you still have to take precautions, because even with a booster or even with 94, 96% efficacy, depending on which vaccine you get, even with predicting that you have 6 months versus 8 months durability with the second dose of the vaccine, you still have to take precautions, because you cannot see, you can feel what a virus feels like, but you cannot predict who is vaccinated and who is truly not vaccinated.
Are we missing any mutations now? I mean, where are we at now? Because I guess the fear is that it will eventually mutate to a form that is vaccine resistant. We're not there yet.
We're not there yet. I have not seen or aware of any new mutations that have been on the horizon. So we have not seen any new cases of SARS-CoV-19 that we have not, any of the vaccines have not been able to cover thus far. So are we truly on the downslope? Some may wonder, since we haven't seen any new cases, or what will kick this virus up again. Viruses are strange. They mutate, they go away, they may come back again. Many have asked, does this mean that I'm going to require another vaccine last year like we changed with influenza? I don't know yet. We have to see. This is so new. It's only been since the beginning of 2020, or for some, late December of 2019. We're still looking even at that data. So it all remains to be seen. But at the same time, for so many people to ask in their dying moments or in their deathbed, give me the vaccine, and we can't give you the vaccine, or give me treatment when it's beyond that window of treatment. If that story isn't convincing enough to individuals, then what is?
Doctor, thank you so much. I know it's a busy day and you made some time for us. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, and have a wonderful day.
Dr. Judith Lightfoot, Rowan Medicine. Still to come on Jersey Matters, we will introduce you to the newly announced Teacher of the Year for 2022. That's next. The pharmaceutical company Merck is asking the Food and Drug Administration to authorize a promising new COVID-19 pill. The Jersey-based company reports that the pill cuts the chance of hospitalization and death from COVID by 50%. If it gets FDA approval, it'll be the first pill on the market that helps prevent symptoms of the virus. Welcome back. It's been a tough couple of years for all of us, but especially for teachers who had to figure out new ways to teach their students during the pandemic. In many ways, every teacher is Teacher of the Year, but there can be only one. Here's my interview with newly named Teacher of the Year for 2022, THERESA Maughan from East Orange STEM Academy. Well, first off, congratulations, Teacher of the Year 2022. How did you feel when you found out? How did you find out you became Teacher of the Year?
It was completely surprising. I actually knew prior to the official announcement, and that was done by a complete surprise. I was prepping for a workshop to administer to new teachers in my district, and then in walked an entourage of the commissioner and other people to make that announcement to me. So I was just flabbergasted by the whole thing.
Well, your kids must be thrilled. Your own kids and the kids in your class must be thrilled, and the school must be thrilled. And I read your story on NJ.com, and it's a fascinating story. Talk about why you wanted to become a teacher.
Yes. Well, there were a few reasons, truthfully. To begin with, I always played school when I was role playing with my sisters, and I always was the teacher. But in my, I guess it was 6th or 7th grade, my family went through an experience with the naturalization process. And, I'm a child of about 11 years old, so I'm not fully aware of everything that's happening with my parents. But they reached out to my school. I was attending parochial school. And my father's visa had expired. He had come to the United States on a work visa. He was a printer. And at the time, we're talking 1970 now, the way it worked, I've come to understand, is that his visa was not going to be renewed because it was felt that he was in a profession that didn't require immigrant workers at that point. So my teachers in my middle school, the equivalent to middle school, they really offered guidance to my family. One of my teachers, who I'm actually meeting with this week, Mrs. Roman, she helped to guide my class through writing letters and arranging for newspaper articles with the Jersey Journal. And I recently found those articles. There are actually 2 of them that was sent to me. And so she also, I think, offered my parents assistance in trying to connect them with our congressman at the time. I believe it was Congressman Gallagher. And through their efforts, we were able to stay, but it really was a very complicated process, getting from that point until the point we received our green card, and then until I became a citizen of the United States.
But your teacher activated a movement, started a movement to keep you here, and taught, I'm sure, everybody in the class something important. So she helped to change all those lives, but she significantly changed your life.
She did.
And is that, so you played teacher before that, but after that, did you think to yourself, okay, that's what I'm going to do?
Actually, after that, I thought I was going to be an immigration attorney because my parents worked through the process with an immigration attorney. And I enrolled at Rutgers University, Rutgers College in New Brunswick, and I actually was pre-law. And by the end of freshman year, I just felt that there was something more that I wanted to do. In high school, I had received the History Award, and I had a phenomenal teacher, Sister Betty Ann Schultz, and she gave me as many opportunities as was available for me to just conduct research and to help in the preparation of lessons that we were presenting. And I thought back to that, and I knew that the classroom was where I felt I was meant to be and where I could make the greatest impact, have the greatest impact on more than just, interacting with a client one at a time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. THERESA MAUGHAN, New Jersey's Teacher of the Year for 2022. Next on Jersey Matters.
Wedding venues across the state are adjusting to high demand caused by couples that had to reschedule their weddings due to COVID-19. And they say it's been anything but easy. More on that story next.
Welcome back to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Mendte. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many brides-to-be and their grooms had to postpone their wedding plans, some more than once. And as Jersey Matters' Jennifer Marin now reports, that created a backlog of weddings-to-be. Jennifer.
Larry, one of the difficulties for those vendors is trying to find dates for couples who rescheduled while also trying to find dates for new clients. And all of this is made even more difficult due to staffing shortages. Deanna D'Antonio has one word to describe planning a wedding during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Chaotic.
Like many pandemic couples, Deanna was able to have a small private wedding, but her big wedding after party has had to wait.
I believe I rescheduled my wedding 4 4 times.
Deanna says the high volume of couples who have had to reschedule made finding an open slot tough.
There was very, very limited availability in terms of dates.
Luckily, she found one, and she's all set for Sunday, December 19th.
I will not believe it until I am walking down that aisle, but I think I feel good about this one.
And she should. Deanna secured a weekend date, which according to Vincent Russo, president of Valley Regency, is rare. In fact, his wedding venue only has a few left until 2023.
There's a lot that are looking for 2022 as far as the weekend dates, the Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays, and we don't have much available. We only have maybe 2 or 3 dates that are left.
During the peak of the pandemic, when they had no choice but to close, Russo had to lay off 75% of his staff. And even though business is once again booming, many of those workers never came back.
We've seen that a lot of our staff that have been with us for a very, very long time decided to leave the industry, which is unfortunate because I lost a lot of good people.
And Russo says the staffing shortage isn't the only problem his industry is facing.
With food costs rising tremendously, labor costs rising, not finding the labor, that our profit margins are down a lot, not just for us, but for all the venues. And it's pretty hard on us, I think, because we do have contracts. We don't have any type of clause or anything in there to raise their price. So we're pretty much stuck on that contract, which we're fine with, we totally understand, but our margins are down tremendously.
And just like Vincent, same-day wedding coordinator Carla Friday says her phone won't stop ringing.
We haven't seen a demand like this ever in our 10 years in business. Obviously, last year we were pretty shut down. We couldn't do anything, and 90% of our year moved to this year.
So much so, she expanded her team.
We had to actually hire a pretty large team to supplement all of this new weddings that are coming our way.
One of Carla's planners is in charge of Deanna's big day, and even though her party isn't what she originally imagined, she has this advice for other couples who are waiting for their turn.
I'm sure, your marriage is something that you're going to be wanting to celebrate forever. So it's not too late to still have your day, even if it's not quite how you expected it to be.
For couples planning their wedding in 2022, Vincent recommends being open to the idea of celebrating on a Monday through Wednesday, as those dates are still widely available and come at a better price. For now, reporting in Clifton, for Jersey Matters, I'm Jennifer Marin.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. My commentary is next. The Supreme Court of the United States, the last word on every legal dispute in the country, the guardians of our constitutional rights, is under attack. Many in the Democratic Party have not given up efforts to expand the court. Why? It's all about politics, because currently on the court there are 6 justices nominated by Republican presidents and only 3 nominated by Democratic presidents. And many Democrats just don't think that's fair. So rather than just wait for a justice or 2 to retire, they would rather change the makeup of the court and add more seats.
We undo the damage that the Republicans have done by restoring balance. And we do it by adding 4 seats to the court to create a 13-member Supreme Court.
Balance. That's an interesting word. Because what the Democrats are proposing, as you heard, is to add 4 seats, all to be chosen by Democratic President Joe Biden, tipping the court in their favor, 7 justices to 6. There's a term for that. It's called court packing. Now, luckily, we have a president who has said on the record he knows how stupid that would be to pack the court. The last president to try to do this was Franklin Delano Roosevelt back in 1936, a very popular president who was frustrated that the court was not to his liking, so he tried to add seats and failed miserably. In 1983, then Senator Joe Biden condemned the idea of court packing at a Senate hearing, and he used Roosevelt As an example,
President Roosevelt clearly had the right to send to the United States Senate and the United States Congress a proposal to pack the court. It was totally within his right to do that. He violated no law. He was legalistically absolutely correct, but it was a bonehead idea.
And just last year, during one of the Democratic presidential primary debates, he strongly maintained that position.
I would not get into court packing. We had 3 justices. Next time around, we lose control. They had 3 justices. We began to lose any credibility for the court has at all.
That's one of the things people have always liked about Joe Biden. His whole career, he has been strong in his convictions. And he was a moderate, swimming in a political sea of extremism. That's who people voted for in 2020. That's not who they ended up getting. After being sworn in, he suddenly became wishy-washy on the subject. In April, instead of making a decision on the issue, he signed an executive order to form a 36-member academic commission to study court packing. President Biden caved to the extreme left of his party and kicked the can down the road.
To kick the can down the road means to avoid dealing with a difficult situation or making a hard decision until later.
A strong leader doesn't kick the can down the road, especially when he told the American people he was against court packing and wouldn't do it. The commission has just given the White House a draft of its court packing report. The final version isn't going to be delivered until November. But even when that final report comes out, the members of the commission say that it will not include a recommendation, just a study of the arguments and the issues. So the members of the commission are kicking the can right back to Biden. When Roosevelt tried to pack the court, he had sky-high national approval. Joe Biden's national approval, according to the recent Quinnipiac poll, is down to 38% and may still be dropping. If Roosevelt couldn't do it, Biden's certainly not going to be able to do it when even members of his own party, members of the Senate, don't think court packing is a good idea. And most Americans don't think it's a good idea either. A Marist University poll shows that only 31% of Americans think adding seats to the Supreme Court is a good idea. 61% of Americans are against it. If President Biden had just shown leadership and stood by his convictions, he could have put this issue to rest months ago. Instead, he let it fester. And now he's facing another possible controversy with the release of this report. Biden ran for president as a strong moderate who was going to stand up to extremists even in his own party. That's who America elected. And that's not who we got. I'm Larry Mendte. We'll talk again soon.